This is the Worker Harrier. Today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks and general maintenance ideas for the Harrier. Harrier is a really solid blaster. I like it a lot. It's a great blaster for a variety of high FPS builds. First thing I'm going to show you is this stock. To remove the stock, you simply pull open on this lever and you're going to pull that back. One of the reasons I'm pulling that off is because you do need to take it off to access the internals. While we're at it, I'm going to point out that there is a hidden Allen key tucked right in here. This little hex wrench will let you get at the entire blaster. Pro tip, get in a good habit of putting this right back when you're done and you'll never be without the key you need to get your whole blaster apart. Next, we're going to remove the barrel. Pretty easy to remove, but the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have actually fired the blaster. So do check that your trigger has already fired and that we are not primed. Then you can go ahead and pull off your scar separately if it's loose enough. After you've removed your scar barrel, you can simply unscrew this barrel, and once it's unscrewed, it will come right out. That is one of the best parts about the Harrier and the Seagull and similar blasters, is that you get a nice threaded barrel for a good barrel lock that's not going anywhere. If you find that your scar barrel, your injection molded piece, is not as tight as you would like it, there are a couple solutions. The first is you can take a tiny amount of hot glue, dab it in there and spread it around. You actually could technically use any adhesive, but hot glue is nice because you can get it out. But the easier solution is generally to use a little bit of tape. Now, tapes are different in thickness, so because I only need a tiny bit of tightness, I'm actually going to use a piece of packing tape. So I will simply make the worst sound known to the warehouse, and I will cut off a very small piece of this packing tape. It does not take much here, and I am going to essentially take the end of my barrel, and I'm going to apply this tape to it just so it's sticking above here, a tiny hair. And the reason we want it to stick slightly above is it'll help hold it in place. If you're finding you're having a hard time getting this to stay on, you may want to wipe your barrel tip clean with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. This will reduce any oils that are on there. And then once you've got that done, you should be able to actually apply this in place. I got a little bit too much in there, so I'm going to simply remove that and try again with a little bit less tape, but the tight and fitness was good. So we'll go ahead and we'll apply this again, just enough over the front. Now I've cleaned the barrel so it'll adhere a little better too. Kind of fold those ends over a little bit, and then we will put this in place. And if this is done properly, you shouldn't be able to see it sticking out of here. It should be nice and clean, have a nice good visual look to it, and we are really firm on there. I'm going to have to put a lot of force on there to remove that. And you want the tape to go mostly the way around if you can, if you've got the right thickness. Otherwise, you want to kind of balance the two sides, a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other. I find using a nice thin tape is easier. Next, I'm going to take off the top rail and take the two halves of the blaster apart. But before I do that, it's worth mentioning you got to take your mag apart. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the two halves apart successfully. Then removing the rail is pretty easy. You're going to take your Allen key that you pulled from the end, and you're going to remove 1, 2, 3, and 4 screws. After you've removed those 4 screws, the rail will pop right off, and I recommend leaving this set aside as it is, carefully with the screws still in the holes. Next, I'm going to remove these 2 screws here, using that same Allen key. When you do remove the last screw, depending on your spring load, the 2 sides of the body will force themselves apart. At this point, we can take the 2 sides of the body apart. It's worth noting this is going to be greasy, and it's supposed to be greasy. This one actually looks like it could use some re-lubrication, so it's a good time to take this blaster apart. Now we're going to go ahead and pull out the plunger itself. Now, it's usually pretty greasy, so I like to have a towel ready. This blaster was actually a customer return because it wasn't sealing, and I think you can probably guess why. I obviously won't name a customer, but this looks pretty dirty. There's hair, there's dust. I would bet this person had a cat, would be my guess. This is not uncommon. My dog sheds like crazy. Buko, good boy. Man, what is he now? 11? He's getting up there. No, he's 10. He's turning 11. This one's dirty enough that I'm actually gonna remove this O-ring altogether, and I'm gonna completely wipe every bit of grease off of this O-ring so I can get all of that dirt, all of that grime. Now, no matter how hard you try, you will get dust and dirt into your blaster over time. So you're always going to want to do this if you've been playing with the blaster for a while, or if you find that your air seal just isn't sealing like it used to. At this point, you can kind of just wedge up a piece of paper towel and work it around to get as much out of here as possible. If it's this dirty, you definitely want to remove everything. This isn't as dirty as the other side, but I'm still going to make sure I wipe it down completely. And I will also pull this O-ring. While you're in here, it's always a good idea to spot check your O-rings, make sure you don't see any cuts or abrasions. I don't see anything on here. These are looking really good to me. Usually if there's wear, it's gonna be pretty obvious. Once you've got these O-rings cleaned up, you can put them right back in place. and it is time to now relubricate. Different blasters are designed for different lubricants, and the worker blaster specifically is designed for a thicker lubricant. So we recommend some sort of super lube. This is what we carry on the shop. There are a variety of types, just make sure it's safe for your O-rings. We know this one works because we've been using it for the better part of 9 years now. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to squeeze out pretty liberal amount on this, and we're just going to rub it around in place, try to twist that O-ring. There's no need to be all that careful. You just don't want to have too little. And you really do want to kind of work it in. You can kind of move that O-ring around. I'd say that's good there. You can't go too wrong here. If you end up with a little too much, you might have some of it work its way out of the blaster down various crevices and down the barrel. But with the worker blasters, we do recommend the thicker lubricant on all of them. You can use the slug slime, it will work, but we have found that over time this stays put better and your lubrication will last longer on the blaster. I might have gone a little heavy there, but again, you're not gonna have any problems from a little extra. And that's all we have to do to lubricate the O-rings. Now at this point, I would be really careful not to touch these to anything. So I like to lean this over the edge of a table, like my hand was the edge of the table, and same with this. Next, I want to clean this plunger tube in here. And this can be a little bit tricky without disassembling the blaster. While you could take all of these screws out and you'll have really easy access to clean it, you do have to take the grip off, which is more of a pain than I really want. It's not really worth the effort. So I'm just gonna take this shop towel, put it over the end, hold on to it like this, make sure that it's long enough to stick out the end so you don't lose it, and we're just gonna put that down there. We're gonna kind of work our way around. And all I'm trying to do is wipe out as much of that lubricant as possible because the dirt and grime will come with it. You might ask, where does the dirt and grime come from? It basically comes from your hands and your darts. The darts go into the mag well and the ram touches them and eventually transfers some of that over to the plunger tube. There you can see, I don't know if you can see, but it's nice and clean inside there. Now that you've gotten this far, we're gonna go ahead and swap a spring. Let me show you how to do that. You wanna watch that again? That's pretty much it. If you've gotten this far, you've already done a spring swap. You just put the new spring on here, longer, whatever spring you want. Now that you've got this well lubricated, you can simply thread this down. You're gonna wanna put this on its side and you're going to feel it fall down into place. And when it falls down into place, it should be down towards the end like that. With the longer springs, it still will protrude, but you should have heard, if you shake this back here, you will hear the spring has gotten into the actual buffer tube. The last step, and this is optional, but it's cleaning up your actual ram. I'm going to remove any grease that's on this ram already. Now you don't want a lot here because you shouldn't need it, but this is a very important O-ring. You want to check the condition of this, make sure that it looks good all the way around. If it has any breaks in it, this is usually the #1 cause of an air seal and it should be replaced. We do have replacements, so hit us up if you need them. You also get a replacement with your kit when you buy the blaster. As far as access, I'm gripping the blaster and just holding that forward slightly. And you don't want much lubricant on here, and lubricant can be optional if your O-ring is really well sealed, but you essentially just want enough to cover it just barely. And the reason you don't want much here is that this drags across your darts and it will attract dust and grime, but to get a good, perfect seal, you are gonna want a tiny bit that gets underneath and around that O-ring. That feels pretty good, so we'll put the blaster back together. After that, we're going to reassemble, which is simply put the two halves together. You'll have to apply pressure, especially if you're using a heavier spring, and we're gonna put those two screws in. Now that we've got everything closed back up, you might think this is time to put the rail on, but really, we're only gonna put the barrel on. We're gonna insert that all the way through, all the way down, and we're gonna rotate that in place. You shouldn't have to use a tool, and you really shouldn't wrench on it hard. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and prime the blaster, and let's see what kind of air seal we get. I'd say that's pretty good. As long as your blaster is holding for a few seconds of air, you're more than good. The difference between a few seconds and 30 seconds is going to be negligible in actual performance, but let's see how long we actually get. I've got a 6 or 7 second air seal. That's pretty good. It's worth noting that because I put tape up here, we're definitely going to actually see a little bit of a leak here, but that will not affect your performance. So really, if you want to do a true air test, you should pull the scar barrel off before doing it. That way you're plugging the actual aluminum. A reminder of where everything seals. You've got a seal in the barrel with the dart or your finger. You have the ram in the middle that has an O-ring, and you have 2 O-rings on the plunger tube. Those 4 points are the only points where air can actually leak out. After this, we're just gonna put our rail back on, and that is pretty much it for tips and tricks. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching.